And I think we are live. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Tuesday extravaganza. I'm just kidding. Our usual Tuesday live stream. I'm here with Dana Morningstar. Wait a minute here. Okay, good. We're good. Okay, we're live. Anyway, just in case we weren't live already, this is Dana Morningstar, as you all know. She is from thriveafterabuse.com, Thrive After Abuse here on YouTube and
Everywhere.
Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. Yeah. So make sure you signed up for her. So subscribe to her as well, because we do this every other week. We do this every week. Last week I was unable to attend, so we skipped a week. But in general, we do every other week my channel, and then we move to her channel and vice versa. I don't even know if I'm talking right. Oh, look, I have a new message about moderation. Okay. Anyway. Okay. So we are we had an interesting topic we were just discussing, and that is the topic of emotional vampires. Earlier today on queenbeing.com, we published a post from one of our fellow survivors who actually talked about she called it the vampire illustration of narcissistic abusers. And so this is kind of an interesting subject. And I guess tell us in the chat, have you ever, hi, Missy. Hi, Mo Cowboy. Have you ever found yourself thinking about the possibility of your narcissist being a vampire? Dana said an emotional one, like where a vampire would suck blood and the narcissist would suck energy, your emotional energy. Dana is fascinated, she said, by vampires. So what are your thoughts on this, Dana?
Yes. Well, what's interesting is there's one person in particular that comes to mind from my past who is so interesting. If you think back to the different ways that you were describing your dynamic with this person, and I continually describe my dynamic with her as she's an emotional vampire. And I was young. I was like 18 or 19. This is before I really even kind of knew or heard the term.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to describe our quote unquote friendship as an abusive relationship. And, fast forward 20 something years, it was like, oh, actually, that's exactly what it was. But my understanding of kind of what an abusive relationship was and who all, could be abused and all of this prevented me from seeing it for what it was. So yeah, I think the concept of emotional vampires is so important. And I'm a big fan, and I know you are too, Angie, of like the whole vampire lore.
It's fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the more, we get into understanding all of this, like the psychological and emotional abuse of it all and how draining these dynamics can be.
Yes.
I really have to wonder if vampire lore has its roots, if it's an allegory, if it's a complete allegory referring to these kinds of people.
For real. That's a really good point. And I'll tell you something, tell us in the comments really quickly, if you guys have ever seen that show True Blood on HBO. It's over now, but you can still watch it on various platforms, I'm sure. Anyway, in the show, the vampires, there are lots of different supernatural creatures, but the vampires and the fairies are the ones that I'm going to point out here. The vampires, let me start over. The fairies, they can hear everybody. They're basically like extreme empaths. Not only can they feel people, they can hear people's thoughts, but the fairies cannot hear the thoughts of the vampires. And so they're more drawn to the vampires because it's exhausting always being able to hear everybody's thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
And so they're drawn to them. And then the vampires, on the flip side of that, they are drawn to the fairies because the fairies, they smell good to them, they taste good to them. And if they eat one of the fairies, if they drain it completely, they can walk in the sunlight. And what I find so fascinating about this is this not a perfect metaphor for, empaths, the fairies, and narcissists, the vampires? I mean, I think it's like a perfect metaphor. And of course, if the narcissist does consume the fairy dies. And it's not that we die necessarily, but we certainly become a shadow of our former selves when we get involved with these people. So I find it very, very interesting. Anyway, what are you've seen that show, Dana?
Yes, I saw it because you had recommended it about
good, right?
6 or so months ago. Yeah, and it is cute. it's a clever premise. The whole concept of like narcissists really, or not narcissists, vampires really existing. And there's this whole kind of vampire rights movement so they can come out of the closet, so to say, and integrate into society and all of that. But, even now that I'm saying that out loud, that still runs a parallel to narcissists, because there's a lot of, when evil tends to come to light and really I'm talking, really destructive behavior, it's very common. People do to kind of tend to champion that cause and be like, well, but they need to be understood. They need to be accepted. They have rights too. And there's all of this kind of outpouring of concern for evildoers.
Yeah.
And I know that might kind of be some strong language in terms of, good and evil, but I think some behavior is so extreme that I think it's appropriate that we call it evil. And I think it's important that we have compassion for the victims first and foremost, and not rush to the aid of the abuser or, the murderer or whoever he is, thinking like, oh, they're a baby bird with a broken wing. They must have had this terrible childhood. We really need to cater to them.
Right.
Ugh.
Exactly. And this is something else on that same vein, I guess. No pun intended. In the show that I was talking about, and I think in probably life, the vampires, they tend to, even though those that are the good ones, it's their nature, right? So they can't change their nature. So they, like, for example, one of the vampires who was like totally in love with this fairy accidentally almost killed her because it was his nature and he was injured or something and he didn't mean to do it, but he did it. And, that's the thing about narcissists, is that they don't change. It's their nature. It's who they have become, who they are. And so we can't expect them to be something they're not, even if they seem nice and sweet and awesome. There's still that nature, and they will at some point, strike back again. And
you brought up a good point about with the vampires being attracted to the fairies in True Blood, that they're attracted to them because of the way that they smell, the way that they taste, and it's all very self-serving. They're not attracted to them as a person and like who they are. It's all just, you can provide me with something, and that's why I'm attracted to you. And then when I get that, you die, I feel better in the moment, and then I throw you away.
And I can walk, and they can literally, think about that, they can literally walk in the sunlight, which they cannot do otherwise, or they will die. And so they're taking the light away from the fairy. And I think the nature factor, the fact that it's not something they're thinking about. It's a visceral thing. When they smell a fairy, what is that? I want to eat that. It's like this animal, like it's visceral. It's within them. They can't help it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying narcissists can't help it, but I'm saying some of them can't help it. They just are who they are. And because of their nature, they will eat you, proverbially speaking, just so they can walk in the sunlight or steal your light or steal your joy or whatever it is, your identity, essentially. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I think, another important part of that, Agatha is saying, this is how you deal with a vampire or a narcissist. You don't invite them in. And Angie, you had said something before we went live about with vampires, kind of the older lore is, they, like you were saying, they come back as a loved one.
Yes.
So there's this, cognitive dissonance between your head is telling you there's something wrong here. This person's really pale. They can only go out at night. They, they're quiet. They're not themselves. They're not the person that I know and love, but your heart wants so desperately for it to be true. Yeah. And that's why we tend to let them in, and metaphorically and in reality and literally. So,
And so I think the ultimate lesson here is, in vampire lore, if you don't invite them in, they can't come in your house. And so in today's, with narcissists, don't invite them in to your inner circle or into your heart as you begin to figure out those red flags and see who's who in your life, recognize whose invitation needs to be rescinded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, in back to vampire lore, I think, the people that do let those literal vampires in, it's not even on their range or their radar of possibility. They're like, had I known that actual vampires existed, I wouldn't have let them in. There's so many parallels, because they're thinking like, well, this is my loved one. They're acting really funny. They kind of seem hurtful. I don't know, but surely they must be able to change. Deep down inside, they're just like me, right?
Right.
Or they're just a normal, decent person, but they've got all this stuff going on. And we fall into that when we're not aware of, like, yeah, there are some really dangerous and destructive people out there. And this stuff doesn't just happen to other people. Like,
Right.
they walk the streets. And so we have to be aware of that this exists, and to be discerning about who you let into your life, and to not hold on to false hope.
Yes.
that a vampire is going to become a fairy.
Exactly.
You got to see it clearly, or if you don't, then it's going to destroy you. Like, you've got to be able to see it clearly so you can respond effectively.
Yeah. False hope is like, it's the killer. Yeah. What'd you say?
It's I'm sorry. False hope is delayed disappointment.
Yeah. And I think for most of us, it can be that thing that it holds us back from actually going away and going, getting free of these people. Because, whether we have it because we are too lazy to, and I say that because I'm talking about myself, to create change right away. It's hard. It's complicated. I wasted too much time because I didn't want to go through the discomfort of the confrontations and the change and all of that. Or we're hopeful because it's our nature, or we're hopeful because, why should we just start over? We've been with this person for however long, or they're the father or mother of our children, or whatever. We figure out ways to be hopeful, and hope is great, but it's not, in this case, when we're talking about toxic relationships, after a certain point, it might be dangerous almost to continue like that false hope, right?
Yeah.
It can be. Anyway, are you ready to go to the comments?
Yes, I have been copying and pasting questions with my new system.
Nice. Right on.
So I have quite a few of them. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me just copy and paste this last one. Okay. This is from Kedra, who asked, how do you stop hoovering?
That is a great question. I would start by saying that you have to block them on every level, block them on social media, block them on, your phone if you can, email, all the things, change your phone number if you have to, and simply don't give them anything back when they try. If they do show up at your door or whatever, just no emotion. Don't answer if you can avoid it. If they do, if they see you somewhere out in public, keep it quick, keep it non-emotional, and just don't give them any energy, any emotion whatsoever. They will get bored when you don't give them what they want, and they will usually move on and go torture someone else, which sucks for that person, but we can't be in control of everybody. What are your thoughts, Dana?
Yeah. I think what Angie's talking about is really reinforcing the point of knowing what we have control over and what we don't.
Yeah.
And she was given a bunch of strategies. This is what you do have control over, changing your phone number, potentially moving, blocking them. But at the end of the day, we don't have control over their actions. You could, if it gets really bad, you could try to get a restraining order, or like kind of letting, the police know that this person's harassing you. But oftentimes that doesn't work either, but that could be a route you go down. And like Angie was saying, just not giving into it. It's a lot like setting a boundary with a child. If this narcissist is trying to get through to you, and it's like a little kid, right? So you set a boundary saying, okay, your bedtime is 9 o'clock. And they throw a fit, they cry, they beg, they plead, they use charm, they do all of these things to try to get you to extend it. And you say no 10 different times, but on the 11th time you cave in and say, okay, in 15 minutes you can go to bed. The lesson that child then learns is, if I continue this bad behavior long enough, mom's going to give in.
Yep.
And it's like that with abusers. It's like that with really anybody else. So this is why it's so important to hold the line, because it's, if you don't, and I, again, I think we've all been there. When we don't, we're not even back at square one. We're back at like square minus 10.
Yeah.
Because now we've got to get them, train them even more, and they're going to really escalate their behavior even more to try to get us to cave in. So yeah, just, I think emotionally preparing yourself for, it's going to be a battle. They're going to try all kinds of, they're going to tell you probably that they have cancer, that they're suicidal, that they need you, that if that they have stuff at your house. They're going to tell you how much they love you, or how awful and abusive you are. Like anything that's baiting or provoking to get you to open contact. So just know that. And when they do, if they do keep trying, then you're not so caught off guard.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. With you. I know you just copied down a bunch of questions, so I guess I'll let you ask the next one.
Okay. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah. Okay. So this is from Ollie, who says he's threatened to commit suicide if he leaves putting a knife to his throat. Basically, what do I do?
Okay. So that's actually interesting. Someone I know, their ex-wife did that same thing. Here's what it comes down to. My advice, and take it for what it's worth, is to tell them that you are not qualified to handle a suicide attempt, and you will be happy to contact the authorities so they can help him in that moment. It's not your responsibility. This is a manipulation tactic. This is a way to, it's a way to keep you around, keep you scared, keep you, maybe bring out your inner caregiver, that kind of thing. And it sucks and it's painful and it's scary. But the fact is, will they or won't they? I mean, certainly it's happened in the past. But my advice would be to call 911 and say this person's threatening suicide and move on. And I know that sounds really cold, but I think that's the only thing you can do. What are your thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, absolutely. That's all any of us can do. And I for sure don't recommend that you meet with them in person. That's how these things turn into a homicide, suicide situation.
That's right.
So, if a person's actively suicidal, they're a threat against themselves. Even if anybody is suicidal, that's the appropriate response, is getting 911 over to them so they can get the help they need. The added benefit is, if he's not suicidal, he learns real quick to not try to play that card with you, because you're not going to get roped into it. You're going to call 911. And that kind of tends to nip that manipulation in the bud, because it's not even a manipulation. It's him trying to hold you emotionally hostage.
Right.
And that's so not cool. So it's just don't feed into it. And at the end of the day too, if he were to actually complete suicide, I think it's important that you realize that you didn't do that. That
right.
This is the decision that he made. He's blaming you for it, but you don't need to own that. This is a really sick, disturbed person who needs a lot of help in a lot of different ways. And we don't have the ability to change them or to fix them or to heal them or even to help them. Like,
right.
They need to do that on their own. So don't own any of that.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
Do you have a question? Oh, I think did we freeze up?
Oh no.
Okay.
Am I still here? Okay.
You.
Okay. That was so weird. Anyway. Okay. Mo Cowboy's talking about that Netflix special. I haven't watched it, but I've been trying to think about watching it, but I've heard so many horrible things. Abducted in Plain Sight. Have you seen that yet?
I have not.
Yeah. Well, apparently, and I don't know all the thing, but He said it's based on a real story with all the actual participants interviewed as part of it, I guess. And I've heard a lot of people say a lot of bad things about it. So I guess it's irrelevant. We can't really talk about it right now because we haven't seen it. But anyway, what's the next question?
Okay, let's see. Again, this is from Ollie, who says, the narcissist in my life is now being nice. Now that I've I'm being mentally abused, but can they change? He's making it out that he wants to change and he's all nice at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So they're being nice and you're like, what do I do now? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and I guess can they change?
Can they change? Oh. Well, unfortunately, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but no, I'm not. I'm pretty right on this one, I think. They don't change. I mean, they may show behavior modifications for periods of time in order to get what they want from you. They might even actually appear to change for a period of time, but the moment they have their claws firmly back into you, you will certainly see that they will go right back to what they used to be. They use niceness as a manipulation tactic. Actually, this is interesting. There was I'm sorry to keep talking. There was this girl, Jenny Moore. She's a fellow survivor. She's been writing some stuff for Queen Being, and she wrote this fishing lure illustration. I did a video about it a while back, and basically what she says is, think about a fishing lure. It is beautiful. It looks like food. It looks like nourishment to the fish. It's specially painted and, all this, it's almost like a work of art in itself a lot of times. And when the fish sees it, what does the fish think? It thinks, oh my gosh, I'm going to get nourishment from this thing floating around in the water. Turns out, of course, that it gets hooked and then the fish gets cut open and fried and whatever, dead. It's dead and eaten. And that's really graphic, right? But think about the narcissist's niceness as a fishing lure. It looks exactly like what you need. It sounds like everything's going to be okay. It looks like you're going to get some sort of nourishment, right? Some kind of food, or I don't mean real food. I mean spiritual food. Like your soul's going to be fed, and finally you're going to get what you've always asked for from the narcissist. But what happens is that you also get, hooked and cut open and fried. I mean, not literally, of course, but I think it's dangerous to fall for that personally. It's just going to lead you right back to where you've always been with that person. Thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, like Angie was saying, don't mistake them being on their best behavior for them actually changing. Change is a process. If it seems to happen like the flip of a light switch, that's a person being on their best behavior. Yeah. And their problematic behavior is so deeply rooted and it's so problematic that I think a lot of people think, well, if they can just stop hitting me, or if they can just stop putting me down or name calling or this or that, then everything would be great. But the reality is there's no healthy self in them underneath all of that. So it's not like if you were to take all that apart, there would just be this, like, you'd be able to have a happy, healthy relationship with them. There's nothing there. So they have to build all of that up. They'd have to unlearn all of their bad behavior and then rebuild a bunch of good behavior. That is a Herculean task for anybody. And you'd have to stay consistently motivated to do it. And none of us like to be continually confronted about our behavior and like what we're doing wrong, especially if we don't see a problem with it, right? So you understanding that, think about how you've got a narcissist or somebody that has a complete lack of accountability. They have very little empathy, very little remorse, if any at all. They don't really experience guilt or shame. They're not going to experience the pain necessary to fully actually change. All you're ever going to see is them faking the part.
That's right.
So if you really want to know, okay, well, maybe, I'm on the 0.01% chance that this person's actually changed. I'd give it 3 to 5 years. Weekly therapy for the next 3 to 5 years. You move out, separate finances, watch his behavior, and then make a decision. And that sounds ridiculous, right? Because most of us are like, no. What if he's in therapy? He's been 3 times. It's like, okay, let's have this conversation after the 300th time, because that's what it takes. Because it's not, if you think about how difficult it is for an alcoholic to just stop drinking alcohol, it's one thing, like you got to do one thing. For them, it's so many things. It's how you handle frustration and anger and disappointment, and you know, how you relate to other people. And it's just, it comes out of every single pore because it's totally interwoven into their personality.
Yeah. And bringing that back around to the vampire thing, it has become their nature. It is beyond them to become something they're not. Most of the, I mean,
Yeah.
I believe in my heart of hearts, I believe it's possible that if a narcissist would ever take the time to genuinely approach some sort of therapy, genuinely dig in and discover their core wound, and as Dana said, basically become a completely different, work through all of their bad behaviors, learn new, better behaviors, all of this stuff. But the thing is, I think it could be possible, but it's never happened to my knowledge ever. And I've talked to a lot of people. Go ahead.
There's this idea out there, and I don't know where this comes from, but it's exactly that. Like if their core wound can somehow be resolved, that they'll be fine. And it's not like pulling a thorn out of a lion's paw.
Yeah.
Like their whole personality has shaped around this, whatever that one thing or dozen things or whatever it was. So it's like a tree. If you have a storm and it knocks over a sapling, and next, 5-10 years later, that tree is growing at an angle. That's how that tree is. You can try to straighten it out, but it's never going to be a normal looking tree, because it just has this bend in it. And personality is kind of like that. And
Dr. David Hawkins talks about that. He believes he's changing narcissists. And I actually had several of their wives contact me. He only works with males. And they've all said to me, yeah, well, there's some behavior changes at first, but a couple things. Number one, they have to go to therapy for the rest of their lives with him in order to make this work forever. Mm-hmm. Which, as Richard Grannon said to me, that was very convenient for somebody who charges by the hour. Yeah. I said, yes, it was. And the other thing he said, or the other thing that the wives told me, each of them, was that, yes, it was behavior modification, and it was temporary, because they would still have incidents of, narcissistic rage and injury and so on and so forth. And so their behaviors were still happening, just a little bit less often. And that was, I just don't think that's effective. As I said, I've never seen a narcissist truly change. And like literally everyone I've ever interviewed about this, everyone I've ever talked to about this, and every bit of research I've done has said the same thing. So that's,
Yeah. And the whole thing with seeing change in somebody, because when I was a psychiatric nurse, I've worked with a lot of personality disordered people, a lot of people that were court appointed, some pretty extreme stuff, murderers, rapists, child molesters. We saw them. And it was really difficult. If you're only seeing them as if, for like a therapist, you're seeing them for about 50 minutes and you're seeing them on their best behavior. Most people can pull it together for that period of time. Them going alone to a therapist it's not going to work, because they're not going to be an accurate historian, because their perception of reality is part of the problem. So I don't even see how he could, actually, I do see how he could think that he's actually curing these people, because he's only seeing a very small slice of their behavior. We saw this when I was working at the clinic, where you would have people, they were on probation, there were stakes involved. If you don't clean up your act, you're going to jail, right?
Yeah.
And you would think that they were a changed person, but then you later find out, oh no, actually, they forged their resume and just got fired from their job, and they're bouncing checks and they're doing all this and that. So I do believe people can change, but more likely than not, the needle doesn't move very far.
Right.
For any of us, because it's just difficult, because it's really difficult for us to see where our issues are, because we're too close to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's just so many factors at play. So
yeah, absolutely. I have a question from Camilla, who says, will narcissists permanently discard you when you tell them you can see through their BS? She said, I went no contact for a month with my narcissist. And then when I sent a text, she said, my life is better without you. So what are your thoughts about that, Dana?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So the question is, will narcissists permanently discard you when you tell them you can see through their BS?
No.
Right.
I mean, you have to realize with a narcissist, or it's all about power and control. And it's all about winning. This is why a lot of their behavior seems so illogical to us, because we keep making the mistake of thinking that they're that they're like us, that they're a normal, decent person, and that we can be rational and reasonable, and that we'll get that back.
Yeah.
And that doesn't ever, or it might periodically happen, which that's what, I guess, what keeps that hope alive. But no, a lot of they will do crazy stuff. They will adopt a pet, or I mean, look at Shanann Watts. Chris Watts had said, "Hey, I want a baby," right? She gets pregnant. He's having an affair. He's been having an affair. He had no intention of staying married to her.
Yeah.
He was the one that wanted the baby. And then what does he do? He kills his whole family.
It's insane.
So it doesn't. Yeah. It's all about whatever they want, but what they often want is so fleeting. It's impulsive and it's not thought through, and there is no depth to it. It's it's like thinking like, oh, I want Taco Bell for lunch. Oh no, actually Burger King.
Right.
Like that's the level of commitment and depth that they have. Seriously.
Truth. And she says, the thing that she added, I want to just comment on. She said, I went no contact with my narcissist for a month, and then when I sent a text, she said, my life is better without you. And I believe that was probably an attempt to hurt you or hoover you or both. So to get the conversation started again. So I hope you were able to walk away from that. Anyway, you got another one for us, Dana?
Yeah. And I think, you just have to see it as nonsense.
Yes.
The whole, like, don't let them in. Pia Melody talks about boundaries and, containment boundary, and what is the incoming, so I forget what word she uses for it, but the internal boundary. And if we don't have that wall up and consciously choose what we let in, when a person hurls an insult at us, it's like throwing a brick through an open window. It just sails right in. We don't need to own that. So you can close that window or you can board it up. So when they say things like that, it hits that wall and it bounces back. It's sort of like, there's no emotional investment. Okay, dude, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm not going to own that. I'm not going to own you killing yourself. I'm not going to own you telling me how awful I am. You have a skewed version of reality, and I'm not going to accept any of it.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to just really quick point out a comment that Charlotte made. She said, and I love this because this is the truth for me as well. I would not be where I am today if mine had never broken me. It made me stronger after I healed. That's the truth. I feel the same way. I feel like I evolved more as a person because of what I went through. I'm not saying I wish I could do it again, or if I could go back and change it, I wouldn't. But I'm saying, silver lining, it does. It helps you grow and become so much stronger. I say all the time, you become the strongest person you know in real life. And it's really been the truth for me. What about you, Dana?
Oh, absolutely. Like I was saying before, it's really difficult for us to see any issue we have with our own behavior. And it, sometimes I have to go around that mountain a few times for it to really sink in. But so it took me a couple of these awful relationships because they all have different behavior. So it's not, I just didn't see it coming every single time. So yeah, now I feel like I really, really get it. And my life is so much better because my boundaries needed a ton of work. My standards needed a ton of work. My deal breakers needed a ton of work. And I didn't realize this until after that second relationship. So there's a lot of like positive things that we can squeeze out of this and make it work for our highest and greatest good. Absolutely.
Agreed, 100%. And here's one more thing I want to share with you. Dandelion says, didn't you once say, Dana, that an NPD said, hope dies last? She said, I learned a lot from that. And I remember at least in one of our streams together, you said that. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, oh God, there's two eerie things that I'll share with you guys that I think will help you get into the mind of these people. The first sociopath that I dated, towards the tail end, we were talking about, I was working at a domestic violence shelter, and I was really frustrated as to why some of these women kept going back. And I said, I just don't get it. What is going on? And he had said, he just looked at me and he goes, hope dies last. And the way he said it just creeped me out so much, because it was like he relied on that to string people along. And then, of course, then I find out that he's, got this ridiculous level of a double life and not the person I thought he was. And, I really do believe that he was drugging me or trying to poison me to get money that he thought I had. So there was that.
Yeah.
The second one was with the second sociopath in my life. And he had asked, we were talking about the first one, and I had said, oh, this was all of this stuff that I had gone through. And he said, well, how do you still trust people? Like, how do you still believe that people are good? And I had said, well, if Anne Frank can believe that people are inherently good, then so can I.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, well, she said that before she got to the concentration camps. And that today still sends a chill to my bone, because really what that means is she thought she knew evil. She had no idea. And
it's powerful.
It's powerful. Like, what? Yeah. When people show you their true colors, like, believe them. Don't try to repaint them, because it works better for you.
It's the truth. I think that's a profound. I think Maya Angelou said it first, didn't she? Like, when people tell you who they are, believe them. Or was it Oprah? One of those two.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm with you on that. And I think that was one that was hard for me when I was in my previous iteration of myself, because my nature is to want to help people. I want to help people. And so when I see a broken person, I'm like, oh, that person's insecure. Let me help them feel better about themselves. Or that person's this, or let me help them with this. And I did the same thing with the narcissists in my life, not including my parental one, because that was no help. I knew that from the beginning. But men, especially, and even a couple of female friends over the years. So it's exhausting. And yeah, as Daga Shannon says, these narcissists all seem to have the same template, same routines, same wording. We share similar stories, and that's the truth. It's it's cyclical. It's crazy. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think if you think of it in terms of the things that they have in common, is that they all lack accountability. And when a person lacks accountability, there's only so many different ways that they can go about, like, shirking that responsibility.
Right.
And that's why we see a lot of the same behaviors, like the blaming, the denial, the deflection, the abusing, the erratic, nonsensical behavior, these kinds of things. Their menu of ways that they navigate life is very limited.
Right. And they do. I hear all the time people say, oh my gosh, my narcissist said exactly that. And that's why I've done these videos where I ask people, like, in my groups, what does a narcissist do, or what do they say in this situation? And then I'll make a whole video compiling all of those answers. And people are like, are these people looking at my window? Are they listening to my life? And that's exactly what you said. Yeah, that's crazy. It is. But on the plus side, at least we can all find each other this way, and we can help each other heal and do better because of those, similarities. So there's something there, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's an interesting question.
Okay.
from NJ, who says, what can I do to stay more in the present moment? I drink coffee, but what else can help?
Ooh, I love this question.
Yeah, I do
So
too.
yeah, I think mindfulness in general is great, of course. Pattern interrupts are great for me. Little things like anything that makes you feel physically your body. So brushing your teeth, taking a shower, washing your hair, brushing your hair, that kind of stuff, simple. But the easiest thing I think is to stand up and move into a different part of the house or a different room or go outside for a few minutes, physically change your environment just a little bit to and there are so many different techniques you can do, like the four corners technique where you follow the four corners of your screen clockwise for 2 minutes or whatever, lots of different things you can do to sort of distract yourself from whatever it is that is keeping you out of your out of your body at the moment, keeping you out of the moment and bring yourself back in. Drinking coffee certainly is a good start, but I find physical self-care to be really helpful and meditation if you can stand it. My meditation involves, I have ADHD and as a complication probably of CPTSD, but I'm managing it mostly. But I tend to put my headphones on and I walk around. And that is huge for me to get me right out of my head and right back into the moment. And I talk about this a lot, but y'all know I have my fidget spinner. It helps me stay in the moment because I'm feeling it in my hands. And that way my mind doesn't wander off too far when we're having discussions. I do the same thing when I'm talking to clients on the phone. I had to get a
Your
real quiet one.
your fidget spinner that
Yeah.
you had the other day,
Yeah.
people on my Wednesday night live streams were cracking up at that. And everybody's like, they thought that was the cutest thing. And I have to agree. I was not expecting you to go there.
It helps me. Okay.
Yeah.
I've always got it in my hand.
I think it's great. It's great.
It works. Anyway. Yeah, it's silly, but whatever it takes is my point. You guys didn't even know I was doing this under the desk until I showed it to you. You know what I'm saying? So whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But any thoughts on that for what kinds of things do you do to kind of stay in the moment?
One of the things that I do is I bring my attention down into my feet. So,
Oh yeah, ground yourself, right?
yeah, grounding yourself. There's kind of like these Zen um, walking meditation
I
paths.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to have one of those, but like even if you just walk around your house or you're walking outside, really focus on feeling your feet as they feel the ground and just being fully present in your body. It's kind of like its own Zen meditation kind of thing, which is weird because you would think that like being inside of your body would be the normal default, but I think for a lot of people it's not, because we're either ruminating about the past, or we're having anxiety about the future, or we're daydreaming. Like we're very rarely fully present.
And I
And
think, I'm sorry.
go
Go
for
ahead.
it. Mhm.
I just want to really quickly add this. I think part of the reason that it's so common for survivors to feel that way is because during abuse, I don't know about you, Dana, but for me, I literally learned to dissociate on purpose. And what I mean is, like, I would, for example, if I was being screamed at, I would focus on a picture on the wall, or I would focus on, something. I would literally imagine I would take myself out of my head, out of my body, and I would go somewhere else, and I would not be there in order to get through the abuse. And so as a result of that coping technique, I had to learn to not do that because it became habit. And so it was really easy. Anytime I found myself stressed out, I'd pop right out of my head.
Mhm.
I mean, I would go away mentally, and I still have to watch myself sometimes and make sure I'm still here. And I know that sounds really bizarre, but it's one of the CPTSD things. And I think that's why it's so common for us people who have gone through what we've gone through to feel like we're not really here. Do you think that's accurate?
Mhm. I think any type of trauma
Yeah,
that a person goes through, you kind of feel like you're not there anymore, that that your life is like a movie.
right.
And there's
Yeah.
kind of this weird numb detachment that can last for a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, so getting grounded in yourself, paying attention, bringing your attention to like the temperature in the room, to any surfaces around you. Like if you're laying down, what are the covers feel like? Um,
Picking all the things that are the same color in the room, maybe like all the pink things or all the
yeah,
green things.
noticing
Yeah.
the different colors in the room.
Mhm.
Um, temperature, sounds, smells, kind
Mhm.
of using all of your senses to just be fully present can really be helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Yep. Okay, let's see here. Do you have
I
another?
Yeah, I've got questions if you
Go ahead.
need one. Okay, so Taravia asks, so you're saying you cannot truly be friends with somebody with that basically is a narcissist. You can't truly be friends with somebody with this kind of a personality disorder.
I mean, okay, so narcissism is on a spectrum. I think at the point at which they become they at the point at which they don't have empathy, they lack empathy, that's the point at which they become toxic. So, and before that, I don't even know if they would be diagnosed as NPD, but um, personally, I think if you have a friend who lacks empathy, you better know that you can't count on them and you better understand who they are if you really want to be their friend. But I wouldn't expect them to be a true friend, as in someone you could count on if you're in trouble, or someone who would keep your secrets, or someone who would, do anything that doesn't benefit themselves. And so that's up to you, my friend. I mean, personally, can I be friends with one of them? No. I cannot. I don't want that toxicity in my life. But, just because somebody is a little bit, stuck on themselves just because they're like, I'm awesome, doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't necessarily mean they're even a narcissist on a toxic level. Narcissism is a spectrum. We all get up out of bed and get dressed in the morning and do what we have to do to survive. That's technically narcissism, so but with NPD, can you really be like true friends with that person? Can you count on them? Will they have your back? I would say no, personally, but that's just me. What do you think, Dana?
Yeah, I agree. If a person's ever been abusive to you,
In any way?
in any way, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, financially, you name it,
Yeah,
then they're not a friend.
that's right.
And this question is if I had to pick one question that's my favorite, it's this one, because this is one we get asked often. And I feel like it can provide people with such a different level of aha moment,
Mm,
um, because it's important. Then we reflect on, okay, how are we defining the word friend? And how are we actually going about choosing who's in our inner circle?
yeah,
Because
good
when
question.
we start to examine that, it's like, oh, wow, actually, yeah, I was using the word friend to encompass, acquaintances or just somebody I happen to know their name. I
Mhm.
wasn't giving that term the weight that it really deserves. And uh, if anybody wanted to be in my inner circle, or if they were nice or funny, or they had some sort of redeeming characteristic, I would move them into my inner circle. But if you, I think it's important to have criteria that is, that they treat you with dignity and respect at
Mhm.
all times, in order for them, and that you can trust them, that at a minimum, they're emotionally safe
Yeah,
for them to be in your inner circle. If they're not these things, then it's time to really do some soul searching and figure out why are you letting people in that treat you like garbage,
good points.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's the thing, that it's painful to learn sometimes, because I think a lot of us, and I know you had a similar experience, if I remember correctly, Dana. Like when we start to recognize one narcissist in our lives, a lot of times we look around and we go, "Holy crap, they're everywhere!" And then, and then we feel like, well, if I let everybody go, I'm not going to have anybody, and I think that's difficult for a lot of people. It was hard for me to recognize that it was bigger than I thought it was, and it's not that they're all really narcissists, but they're you people who tend to draw in to attract narcissists to themselves tend to notice that they find several, and that's usually because they are a loving, giving person, and these people all are aware of this, and then use that to their advantage until we wake up and go, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. So it's a I guess I'm just adding this in because I think it's important to recognize that it does happen to a lot of us. And almost every client I've ever spoken with in person, on the phone or Skype or whatever, has always said to me, at some point, well, now that I figured out this person's a narcissist, now I notice my best friend and my mom and my uncle and, the neighbor, whatever. I'm just saying.
Mhm.
And so then you have to kind of figure out your boundaries and like Dana said, inner circle is important, and that really, it makes a big difference when you start to uphold those boundaries a little bit more effectively. All right, go on. Sorry,
Yeah.
I got a little off track there. This is an interesting question from Princess Rachel. I like that name.
Mhm.
Princess anybody's fun. Also, anyway, Rachel, she says, is there any legal recourse if you suffer great costs after your relationship with a narcissist, as in health, family, friends, licenses, money, credit, literally everything? And, you know, in my experience, and I'm not a legal expert, but I am someone who went through divorce with a narcissist, and also going no contact with a parental narcissist. And I think I did not, I had no legal recourse. As a matter of fact, after I left my ex-husband, he went and I very carefully and methodically changed all the bills from my name to his name, sat down with this man. I'm so stupid. I sat down with him and I showed him how to pay the bills because he didn't know, even though he was 8 years older than me. Um, and I showed him what he needed to make per hour to maintain this house he was living in and all these things. And what he did then was run up all the bills, get the stuff turned off. And because we were not legally divorced yet, he called back to all the bill companies, and he, like the gas company, the water company, the phone company, etc., changed the bills back over into my name. And then so I stayed somewhere for 5 months saving up my money before I could buy my own place. And so when I did buy my own place, I had to then pay all of his bills off that he had run up in my name, and they wouldn't do anything. I could prove I wasn't living there with him. I could prove I had moved the bills out of my name. But because we were legally married in that
Mm,
moment, I had to pay them all, or
yeah.
I couldn't have water and gas and electricity in my house. So I did not. But to be fair, this was 1998. So, it 98, 99. So it was a long time ago, but and every state's laws might be different. But in my experience, I did not have any sort of legal recourse I could take. What about you, Dana?
Um, yeah, I would say talk to an attorney in your
Yeah,
area. Normally they'll do like a free consult, but generally by and large, it's I think it's very
difficult.
difficult because a lot of it is he said, she said,
Yeah,
unless you have hard facts to prove it. And I think laws are slowly changing, but emotional and psychological abuse, unfortunately, is more often than not kind of looked at as just uh, difficulties in a relationship. It's not given the
the
weight that it
weight.
deserves.
Yeah. And I will say this too, if this is helpful at all. I do have in my uh, team of coaches, I have a paralegal who has a little bit more understanding about laws than me. So if you want to look into we have a blog for her at divorceyournarcissist.com if you want to check that out. She also has a support group where she personally answers questions. So you can check that out all through that divorceyournarcissist.com if you're interested. But I don't have any other information right now at the moment on that. But I have heard that, Dana, that they're changing
Mhm.
or they're trying to change the laws. And I know, like I think I want to say in the UK, they have changed, they have actually added laws, haven't they, about emotional abuse, if I remember correctly. Um, I don't
Yeah.
really know all the details of that, but I know that they have done something in some countries. We haven't got it here that I'm aware of yet, but anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let's see. Okay, here's a comment from Camilla who says, I've been coming to these live streams for a few months and I can feel a real shift in
Okay.
how I see things for the better. It's amazing.
I love that.
I do too.
Love
Yeah.
it. Thank you, Camilla. um, Tommy Taylor says, what if they're using aliases online to stalk you and you don't know who they are? Um, and the only thing I would say to that is, protect yourself, do what you can, and then don't accept friend requests from people who you don't know. Lock your profile down. Like I've locked my kids' profile down in such a way that if you can't search them on Facebook unless you're already their friend. They have to friend you. So that's a possibility. Don't let people tag you in things if they're friends with that person, whatever. But outside of that, and there are some resources for you at queenbeing.com/stalker that are free if you're interested.
Mm.
But Dana, what are your thoughts on that? I know you've actually personally dealt with some of this stuff with stalking, haven't you?
Yeah, it's difficult because, for us, Angie, we can't readily just disappear. Uh,
That's
had
true.
had I not been, so easy to find. And if I could, then I think it's really helpful to just, for the time being, create a fake Facebook, create fake social media. Do not use the same pictures. Do not use the same name. Do not befriend the same people. Just, you've got to kind of lie low. And like Angie was saying, don't take any incoming friend requests. Make sure that your privacy settings are on lockdown. Do not engage with these people. And for me, I think the peace of mind of just having a different email address or a different phone number or different Facebook, and then you just know, like, you're not holding your breath all the time, hoping or wondering, oh no, did they contact me, or hoping that they didn't contact you. Like, all of that mental energy that you're spending on that is just, it's not there, because you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, with you. Yeah, I think that's important. And I know we've talked about that in previous streams as well, the stalking thing. It's crazy. I just lost the question, but it's from Crystal. She said, isn't it sick when we miss the Hoover, when we miss all of that? And I just want to tell you that it's not sick. It's normal. And it's because we feel addicted to them, and there's a whole bunch of science behind that. But recognizing that we all have felt that way on some level, and that we all want them to want us. It's our human nature to want to be wanted. But we have to take our logical selves. We have to, like, put on our scientist hat and tell our heart, shh, shh, just for a minute, calm down. And it sounds silly. I'm talking to you like you're a kid. I don't mean to. I talk to myself this way. Sometimes you have to be a scientist and not let your heart run the show. And this is one of those times when you have to look at this logically and go, okay, yes, I miss that person, and own those feelings and work through them. Recognize you miss that person because of the codependent, like, cocktail that has been created in that relationship. I'm not going to go into all the science, but it's involving your brain and addiction and all the things. I've done videos on it. But ultimately, does it make you, technically, I guess technically you could call it sick, but I don't want you to think of yourself as sick. I want you to think of yourself as, okay, I went through a bad thing. I'm sort of addicted to that person. That person even is sort of addicted to me, and I need to figure out how not to do that. Like Dana was saying, it seems so simple, like just don't drink the alcohol if you're an alcoholic, right? But it's not that simple, because you have to figure out all these other little things. Dana, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I really had to do some tough love with myself when I was going through this. And so when those emotions kicked up of, kind of secretly, I wish that they would contact me, or, what have you, I had to just tell myself, like, oh, if I really miss them, like, so what? Like, and what?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's an addiction. It
Yeah.
truly is. It's sort of like if you're on a diet and you're like, man, I really want some Oreos. It's sort of like, okay, that's interesting. And what? Like, you're not going to go do it if you want
Yeah.
to stick to the plan. So have the feeling, feel it, but realize you don't need to, you don't need to act on it. And it's very common for people to, this kind of relationship addiction, especially to them, it can be so deep. And especially if there's all kinds of things entwined, like children and friends and money and all of this stuff, it's difficult. So, like Angie was saying, just having self-compassion for yourself and feeling how you feel, but just realizing that you don't need to act on it.
Absolutely. And I just want to add one more thing that Dandelion Green said that I think is true and important. She said, I think we still feel the Hoover is proof of our worth. She said, I did, but it's not. And she's right. I think that
Yes.
puts a pin in it. That's it. I mean, why do we want it? Because it feels like, to be wanted is to be loved, to be needed, whatever. We think it's proof of our worth. And she's absolutely right. It's not proof.
And it's some sort of crumb that they must care.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I've seen this taken to a whole different level, where somebody's like, well, I was reading about all these different sources of supply, and, how can you tell if you're the primary supply?
Yeah.
What? Like,
why would you even
Why are you supply? Right.
Right.
I mean, I get, again, I get it. I was there.
Me too.
But when you're outside of it, you just realize like that level of thinking is so heartbreaking, because you're worth more than crumbs.
Right.
And don't, just because you're the primary supply doesn't mean that they somehow care. It means that you're the one that they've targeted to rope into hell. I mean,
That's right.
I had a coworker of mine, she's been married to 20 years. This guy is awful, lies, cheats, steals, you name it. And she keeps viewing it as he will continue to quote unquote fight for their marriage. He won't divorce. She has said, I want a divorce, and he won't let it. And he's like, well, you know what? We're Catholic. We don't believe in that. And I love you. How can you give up on us? All of this stuff. And so she's misreading all of his, intensity and persistence as that he cares. And it's like, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Come on. Like,
Yeah.
he just doesn't want to get a divorce because for who knows what reason.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. The Glitter Girl made an interesting statement, and I can't see the part where who she's responding to, or exactly what she was responding to, but she says, I want to assume that Sweetly Me said, can you stay with them and be okay? Because then she says, Glitter Girl, I don't believe so. You're still hooked up to the IV dripping poison slowly in your veins, so to speak. You have to get away. And I think that's 100% true. I mean, that kind of all, don't you think? I mean, because even if you know what you're dealing with and you are logically like actively combating this and actively using the strategies that we teach to deal with these people, you're still getting the abuse. And even though the strategies might make it easier, these are temporary strategies to use on your way out the door, not to, or if you have to deal with them because of custody or business or divorce or whatever, not because we want you to stay in those relationships. I think this is it's the IV dripping poison slowly into your veins, so to speak. I think that's important. And it's, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. If we can tighten things up, to make it to where, your safety and sanity are your number one priorities, then everything else falls in line.
Yeah.
And if you've got people in your inner circle, or you've got a job or what have you, that's absolutely just draining you emotionally, or it's dangerous and you're at risk, these kinds of things, then it's time to go. Like, that's, this is part of truly respecting and valuing ourselves, is making sure that we stay safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, again, I can relate to the mentality of, I don't want to give up on this because the good times are so good, or I feel so strong. Maybe even the good times maybe there are no good times, but I feel so strongly towards this person. I don't want to let them go. So then they start coming up with all of these different ways to try to cope with, something that's not copable, and try to just limp through and, coast on fumes basically with this relationship, and then until they're discarded.
Right. Yeah.
And then that's devastating. So
absolutely. Finn said something that's kind of funny. I don't know if it's a real thing or not, but it says humor helps recovery. I agree with that. And he says, or she says, best narc username, Mimi Meandy, Mimi, Mimi, me and I is what it spells out, MEANDI. I think that's funny. Anyway,
that is cute.
Lighten the mood a little bit.
Yeah.
Mo Cowboy has some hilarious things to say, but some of them I will not say at the moment. But basically, they were talking about cheating in the chat and how cheating is not ever accidental, and I totally agree with that. I think that's a bunch of BS when people, like, you don't just fall over into a person, or vice versa. But
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is not actually, he says NPDs in therapy get worse. They learn to lie and cheat more efficiently. Thus, the SA will become more toxic. I don't know what SA means. I'm having a brain moment here. But then he says, even prisons are dropping therapy for NPD types because they get worse, not better. And I think that's a very interesting concept. What were we going to say?
Oh, about the falling, it's not an accident. I was watching a true crime video the other day, and it was a guy who had stabbed this woman to death. Okay. And his defense was that he didn't stab her, that she fell on him while he was holding the knife.
Come on.
This is total. And so then the detective was like, well, she was stabbed 12 times deep. And the guy just would not own his behavior. It was just that takes the cake for like the most ridiculous thing I think I've ever heard somebody say, as far as try to not take accountability for their actions.
Right. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Oh, KG says, does anyone use the app Headspace? Is it any good? I actually have used it. I have it, but I haven't actually gone as far as using it yet. Oh, I can't give you anything else, but I've heard really positive things about it, which is why I downloaded it. I just haven't got around to stopping enough to use it. I tend to, like I said, I walk with the music. It helps me. Yeah. Anyway, Dana, do you have any other questions you want to grab before we go? Because I think we are just about out of time here.
Gosh.
There's so many, I know.
I have a few, but I think they might be kind of long. Here's a quick one. This is from Wendy, who says, what if your soon-to-be ex is also schizophrenic? I left for a 6th time and filed for divorce. I'm scared of him.
I think then you have to do all of the right things to protect yourself, cameras, locks changed, block them, do everything you can to protect yourself, but then don't live in fear. Make sure that you have all of the, get a restraining order if you can, and lock your doors and put the cameras up and all the security measures that you need to take, and alert your local police to what you're dealing with and all of these things. But outside of that, I don't think you can live in fear forever. You have to figure out a way to stay safe and move forward. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Dana.
Yeah. And I guess there's 2 things. If you're really afraid for your life, I would strongly encourage you to think about moving. It is worth it. The expense, the inconvenience, all of that is completely worth peace of mind, knowing that he doesn't know where you are.
Yeah.
So if that's possible for you, I would strongly consider it. The part with him having schizophrenia, and I don't know if you mentioned that because there's concern of, well, maybe he doesn't, mean this, or maybe I should be softer, kind of have more sympathy for him. If that's the case, please know, like, there's no excuse for this kind of behavior. And regardless of they're drunk, they have schizophrenia, they're, an abuser, they're a narcissist, it doesn't matter. You've got to just treat it all kind of the same way and be self-protective to whatever degree you need. If you were mentioning that he was schizophrenic in terms of completely erratic behavior, everything that Angie says, calling your police, getting cameras, erring on the side of caution, having that situational awareness of when you get in and out of your car, not hesitating to call 911 if you need to, potentially having some sort of personal protection in the house. And
toxic is toxic, whatever the label is. Somebody who's abusive is abusive. Somebody who's toxic is toxic. And, you, like Dana says, you have to be self-protective. You must. You're the only thing you have, Yeah. And we're all the only thing we have, so don't think I'm implying otherwise, but yeah. All right. I guess we are about to wrap up because I am about to jump into a client call, and I know Dana has plenty of things to do today as well. So we will talk to you guys next week over on Thrive After Abuse. So make sure that you pop back over there. And Dana does streams on Wednesdays.
Yeah. Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. So make sure you check those out. And when is your book club, Dana?
The last Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Right. So all of that over at Thrive After Abuse. Make sure you subscribe there too. All right. Okay. Dana, thank you as always. This has been really good and I appreciate you so much.
All right. Same. Thank you.
All right. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.